Hello and welcome to the Simpit. I'm Andrew Fayash III, and today I'm going to be covering driving techniques for the street stock. It's important to keep in mind that the street stock has the largest gap in power to weight of all of iRacing's dirt content. That essentially translates to the car being the toughest to drive out of the box. It's going to require more wheel input going into the corners, and the throttle isn't going to save you from the wall nearly as easily. Today we're going to cover both USA and Volusia with the fixed setups for each track. Let's start with USA since it's the free track that everyone has access to. For ease of explanation, I'll be breaking the corner down into three segments: entry, middle or center, and exit. USA has some long straightaways and tight corners, which means we're going to need to do more slowing down here than other tracks. In order to properly set the car into the corner, you should, while still full throttle, start to turn the car in. Once it starts to turn, you want to lift to about half throttle, then apply the brake to slow it down and get the car pointed to a good angle. The throttle is used to keep the car from sliding up the banking and keep your momentum in the right direction. On entry, a sharp angle isn't a bad thing here, especially if you're trying to hold a low line while side by side with another driver. As you approach the center of the corner, you want to slowly reduce the angle of your car, and you should be off the brake completely at this point and back to full throttle. For corner exit, you'll want to have the car already pointed the direction of the straightaway before you're even completely out of the turn. This will keep you from scrubbing off any straightaway speed. Just be mindful of the wall or any drivers to your outside. Now the approach for USA is pretty much the same at both ends, but there are a couple unique things about the track that I want to cover. On entry to turn 1, clipping the grass at the bottom is okay, but it will bounce your car around and can, if you hit it wrong, straighten the car back out, causing you to have to reset your car mid-corner. Coming out of turn 2 on the bottom, don't be afraid to put your left front tire on the grass. It should stick pretty well off of there. Just don't go too low or it'll kick you sideways. Down in 3 and 4, when you're running the low line, you need to be mindful of the inside wall. If you catch the wall, you have to be ready to check up and correct so you don't fly way up the track and potentially cause some mayhem. Now it's time to show you how to drive on a worn-in racetrack. Just for reference, I want to explain the different levels of wear and what to look for. Starting with the wet, fresh, or clean track, this can be as treacherous as dry, slick track, though the technique to stay out of trouble is different. When you're in the wet, you'll want to slow down a little extra on entry, potentially a little early, and use a lot of throttle to keep the car from sliding up the hill. This part of the track here is tacky. This is the gold that everyone should be fighting over. It's got the most grip and is the easiest to drive on, even if you make small mistakes. This section of track is dried up. You can still use it almost as perfectly as tacky, but it'll quickly transition to the next state. And this section here is dry, rubbered up, black track. It can be real slick, real slippery if you're not careful. Once a dirt track takes on rubber and slicks up, patience and finesse will be needed to stay fast here. Whenever a track gets like this, if you can't avoid it, you need to be careful with all of your inputs. Don't crank a lot of wheel into it. Don't go full throttle unless you're pointed straight and your momentum has you going straight. And don't go full brake unless avoiding an accident. It may take some practice to run in the rubbered up slick like this, but if you can drive well in this, you can drive well on any surface. And finally, the loose stuff. This is the dirt that has been thrown to the outside by everyone's cars. If you get in this, you'll probably push on entry, maybe even get into a four-wheel slide that could carry you all the way to the wall. And nearing exit, it can even throw you extra sideways on short notice. Now that I've explained the various surface changes, let's drive in it. On corner entry, it's important to have at least one tire outside of the rubbered up area. Obviously, the more tires you can get outside of it, the better, but it becomes impossible to do so after a while. If you've got the left front below the black, or only the right rear in it, you can use the brake and throttle technique as normal to set the car. Just don't go full brake or full throttle unless absolutely necessary, and only do so for a split second. If you can't avoid the slick, just be a little easier on the inputs. Again, don't use more than half throttle or half brake, and you should be able to make the corner pretty well. Navigating the center of the corner isn't very different than a tacky track, except that if your right rear is in the slick, you don't want to get full throttle just yet. You do still want to roll into the throttle a little bit at a time to keep your momentum up, but full throttle can pitch or keep you more sideways than you want to be for your exit. Exiting the corner is pretty much the same as tacky. You'll want to get full throttle as soon as you can. Even if you are still in the black, if you get the car pointed the same direction as the straightaway, you should be able to get full throttle regardless without too much wheel spin. If anyone tells you that a dry track is slower than a tacky one, they aren't driving it right. It's a lot more difficult to be consistent, but a fast lap is still possible, as I'm going to show you here. I do want to mention that the outside line at USA isn't as fast for the street stock as it might be for some of iRacing's other vehicles, but it is very possible to defend a position from the top. You do, however, have to be careful with catching your right rear tire on the wall on both corner entry and corner exit. A couple things to keep in mind when running the top: your turn-in point is going to be further down the straightaway, which makes your braking and lifting points further into the corner. Otherwise, this technique is the same. It'll take some practice to get used to it though, and you want to try to get your right rear outside of the black, but not all the way up into the loose stuff if possible. Now, onto Volusia. Luckily, this track overall is a lot easier to drive. There are barely any straightaways to this place, so it's not as big of a requirement to slow down for the turns. I'm not saying you should go full throttle all the time. I'm just saying it's possible to go around here full throttle if you want to. If you plan on running the low side at all, you can and should use the brake via the same method we covered for USA. But if you've got room to work with, simply lifting after you throw the car into the corner will suffice. I would even recommend pumping the throttle if the car doesn't get as sideways as you want on entry. There isn't too much difference to technique here, but there are a few specific things to keep an eye out for. There's a pretty big bump on the front straightaway that can catch you off guard, but you can also use it to throw the car into turn 1. It essentially creates the same sort of weight shift on the car as lifting or braking would do, without as much of a loss of speed. The banking seems to flatten out a few lanes up the track, so if you get out wide in a corner, you may have to use the throttle and brake technique to slow down a bit while keeping your car pointed at a good angle. The back straightaway isn't exactly straight, so you want to be extra mindful of where your right rear tire is on entry to turn 3. The inside wall in 3 and 4 is easy to get into and can be very scary if you clip it after the center of the corner, so you gotta watch out for this just like you did at USA. Exiting turn 4 is really deceiving. You'll feel like you've got plenty of room and angle to exit without catching the wall or a driver next to you, but the wall straightens out before the corner ends, meaning the track narrows pretty quickly. Also, to make setting up passes easier here at Volusia, running a high entry and a low exit seems to be the way to go. You can set the car on entry with a sharper angle than normal and run it down the banking, across the black, and come out with plenty of tacky track down low to get forward bite with. And that's all you need to know to be fast in the street stock. If you found this advice helpful, please leave a like. If you have any further questions or feel like I missed anything, feel free to comment as well. This has been the Simpit. I'm Andrew Fayash, and as always, enjoy the dirt.